of other people's negligence for over 50 years here in South Florida. If you get injured as a result of somebody else's negligence, it can be a car accident, it can be a slip and fall, medical malpractice, negligent security. If somebody else's negligence caused an injury to either you or one of your loved ones, give us a call. Our phone number is on our page, our website is on our page, and our email addresses are on our page. Please give us a call for a free consultation. We'd love to help you. Let Zach and I protect your rights.
Hello, everybody.
Fish on First Live, presented to you by Burger and Hicks. Make sure you go check them out. Everything is down below. I'm your host, Kevin Brawl, here with Isaac Azout, Eli Sussman, and Nate Karsmer, talking some Marlins as they go into a big divisional series against the Atlanta Braves, 4-game set. A lot to talk about with the trade deadline and most recently the Citrus series. We'll run through that real quick just so we can get to the grand scheme of things. As we all know, the many moves Peter Bendix made. But Nate, take us through it, man. I mean, Marlins lose the first one. Jake Burger goes yard in both games. Roddery looked really good in that second game, probably one of his better starts. And your boy Xavier Edwards looking really good in those 2 games as well.
Yeah, I mean, we saw probably one of the most interesting lineups in recent history for game one. We all had a little bit after the stream. We had quite the reaction to that. But yeah, I mean, Emmanuel Rivera stepped up. Jonah Bride also stepped up yesterday. I believe he's an above average hitter in terms of OPS. A WRC plus and OPS plus. So that's good for him. Utility guy that, probably will slide around the second half of the season, these last, 60 games or so. So it was overall encouraging against a Rays team that has had the Marlins number dating back to 2018. The Marlins have a handful of wins since then. So, yeah, you touched on Rodrigo Munoz, also outdueled Taj Bradley, which I'm sure not a lot of us were expecting. So encouraging for him as well to limit the home run ball against a Rays team that kind of plays in a smaller place like the Trop. So with the guys they had, I was fairly impressed that they were able to split this one. So maybe a good sign moving forward, as good as it can be, I should say.
Yeah, just a reminder, the Rays also sold off quite a bit of their veteran players at the deadline as well. So they're in an interesting spot. It's supposed to be a better team. And as you pointed out, with Taj Bradley in particular, he had been coming off 3 straight scoreless starts against better opposition. And then this one, unfortunately, for my fantasy team, he did not pitch very well. Allowed home runs to Berger and to Bride. Yeah, as you mentioned too. But Bride, really quietly, he's just been steadily productive. That was a guy that when they acquired him, there were some things to be curious about. He frankly fell on his face when he's had previous opportunities at the big league level, but then all of a sudden now, kind of by default, he's playing close to every single day and hitting just a little bit. So I'll be curious to see what those numbers look like later in the year before we get to the end. And really the difference here was just the bullpen. In the first game, they come in for Edward. Edward Cabrera was great through his 5+ innings before his minor injury scare. Everything seems to be all right with him, though. Thankfully, he's going to make a scheduled start this weekend. But the bullpen in relief of him allows like 7 earned runs, whereas in the second game, throwing up zeros with Calvin Fauché, it seems that he might be the new closer by default between him and Nardi. We'll see how that works out moving forward. It's just going to be obviously less consistent when you trade away the majority of your bullpen all in one foul swoop at the deadline. That's something that they're obviously willing to live with under these circumstances. And I already recorded a pod on this on Xavier Edwards closing out an amazing month. One of the highest batting averages that any Marlins player has ever had in a single month, much less somebody who is in his very first month as an everyday big leaguer. He's never had the stretch of games that he's been able to play this often, and he's crushed it. Absolutely crushed it. Both sides of the plate. He's been awesome. He's got 900+ OPS from both sides of the plate while playing shortstop, while stealing like 9 bases over the course of the month. And he was, again, impactful in this series as well. He's just been so consistent. So that has been fun to watch. He has very definitively asserted himself as the leadoff man for this team for the foreseeable future.
Lewis Adio Weiss joining us here. I'm going to go to you, Lewis, real quick. We need to talk about Jake Burger. I mean, this month of July, he's been OPSing 963 with 8 home runs, 15 RBIs. he's been really good. There's no other way to put it. What's been working for Jake Berger this month of July? And he could very much be the team MVP by default with the amount of guys that are on the way out, just looking at this roster.
Yeah, it just shows you how far he had to come, because I'm pretty sure I was looking at it today. His OPS is still south of 700. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's like 689, and he's walking a little bit more this month. Obviously, the added play discipline is an element to his game that is largely lacking, and you generally can't teach it. So for him to be doing that is obviously a large part as to why, he is having the kind of quote unquote bounce back month he is after subbing sub 700 OPS the previous month. Problem with Berger, though, and kind of, his mold of hitter in general, is those low OBP guys tend to resort to streakiness, in that they could kind of carry you for a couple of weeks. I'm sure a lot of us here remember the likes of, say, Jay Bruce, who was very similar, low OBP, but he had power in spades. And, you kind of had those 2-3 weeks. In this case, for Berger, it's been about the entirety of July where he could kind of just carry, and not necessarily carry an offense, because it really doesn't take much to do so, given the state of the current Marlins offense. But, it's a product of him kind of being, I guess, the guy that's going to get pitched to the most, given the state of their current offense. So, good for him to exude a little bit more patience, and then obviously the power coming back as we kind of all expected it would.
Anyways, yeah, so we'll talk a little bit more about these guys as we get into the next series. But let's talk about what just happened a couple days ago, the trade deadline. Marlins make a lot of moves, a lot of new players. I want to say about 15 new players. I want to say maybe, yeah, just about that number. So we're amazing graphic here. Now fixed Sync Huascar Brazoban. So good stuff from Eli there. Isaac, talk to us, man. A lot of movement. Did you expect to be this much movement? We knew that they were going to sell off some pieces. Did you think it was going to be this many?
Yeah, we just finished recording with the great Craig Mish. Episode drops tomorrow. And, I thought that, this was one of the busier trade deadlines across all of Major League Baseball in recent memory. And he said, absolutely, without a doubt, this was the most active deadline that he has covered. And, the moves speak for themselves. The Marlins traded 9 players off their active roster this trade deadline, and they acquired, I think it's 15 players to their organization. And I think there's a lot of different ways you can go at this. I think the main part, and we got to take Peter Bendix's word for it, and this was confirmed on the episode as well, that they are just going for the best players available. It just so happens to be that a lot of these guys are knocking on the door. And, so does that mean that they're going to be somewhat competitive in 2025? Maybe, maybe not. But when you look at names like Connor Norby and Robbie Snelling and Davison De Los Santos and Agustin Ramirez, like those 4 guys can really help this team very quickly, very soon, and in a big, impactful way. The Marlins think they have a real hit-first, impactful catcher in Agustin Ramirez, and it's just really, really hard not to be very excited about these group of guys. I think even the pitcher they got from Pittsburgh, he's exciting if he can ever be healthy, but it's a really fun time if you're prospect nerds like us. And I think you're going to see a lot of these guys. These aren't 18, 19-year-old kids in low A and high A. These are guys that are knocking on the door of the big leagues, and we should see them at Lone Depot Park very soon. Connor Norby, definitely see him in 10 days or so.
Nate, let's talk a little bit about some of the guys in the return. Obviously, the big name was Connor Norby, but by far the biggest name they got. Kyle Stowers, the other one in that trade for Trevor. What stands out to you about those 2 guys? We already saw Kyle Stowers in a Marlins uniform. Not a very good debut, but you could only go up from going 0 for 4 with 4 Ks, I guess.
Yeah, something on these guys also, the ones that have already played. Very good first impression so far. De Los Santos is 2 jacks. Cerna had 6 hits between 2 games yesterday, and Ramirez, I believe, had a double as well with 2 other hits in his other 2 games. So getting everyone, they're just keeping the excitement up, I'd say. And like Isaac said, they clearly have been taking the best player available. And we kind of got deked. We, especially with the acquisition of Dylan Head, we might have thought that it might be 4 or 5 year process. They might go for guys that are 18, 19, probably the oldest 20. And then Peter Bendix goes out and gets guys who are, like Isaac said, knocking on the door. Could be up end of this year, beginning of next year, around opening day, definitely at big league camp, which is going to be interesting. A lot of us have touched on that as well. So, I mean, between De Los Santos, between Ramirez, there's a lot of power there, and Norby as well brings a lot of power. And Stowers, I mentioned on the deadline stream that if he just figures out his contact, which we saw firsthand, he had the golden sombrero in his Marlins debut yesterday. if he figures out, how to hit the ball more consistently, he could, which the Marlins hitting development has, at least recently has improved upon. So if he learns to, spread all fields, improve his contact rate, he could see a lot of improvement from him. And Isaac did touch on Shim. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. He was the number 2 international pitcher in the class of 2023 international signing. A lot of good stuff. He has to stay healthy. He's been injured pretty much the entire year this year, but he has ramped up, according to Bendich, throwing a little bit of bullpen action. So I really like what the Marlins did out of him. So like I touched on, Peter Bendich really knocked this one out of the park. And hopefully, one more thing on Norby. Eli touched on it on the pod today, that they don't want to bring him up to play second, which maybe shows they're still not all the way confident in Xavier Edwards sticking it short. So they want to get him some work at third, which I like. Might be a little bit of service time, if I'm not mistaken, but we'll still see. So hopefully him and De Los Santos and Ramirez can keep raking in Jacksonville and keep us looking out for those guys. So I like what I've seen so far.
Yeah, well, say about Norby, you bring that up, not so much service time, but probably rookie of the year eligibility is on their mind, that they want to keep him rookie eligible for next year. If they bring up now, then he would graduate. If they wait until like the very end of August, then he could still play the rest of the year and still be eligible next year. That might be on their mind. That'd be really weird to focus on. But I think there is that very real question about position and how he fits in. And I think it'd be just a big plus if they give him consistent reps at third base in the minors. And if they feel really good about him before bringing him up, then that just gives them more directions they can go to get his bat into the lineup moving forward. Just to address this about Agustin Ramirez, if he was a slam dunk to be a solid catcher, he probably wouldn't be available. He would be like somebody that is clear top 100 prospect in baseball, if not way up there. And the only reason why he's somebody that is kind of a possibility is because there's that question about him where he has a strong arm, but he's also not throwing out runners this year for whatever reason. His receiving and his framing and his blocking is something that our understanding is that team is a big question about what he can do blocking pitches. And, so it's a mix of things that are somewhat teachable, somewhat developable about, but there's real questions about whether he'll be decent enough in order to play there long term. He has a lot of experience at catcher, but he still is not fluent in it, if that makes any sense right now. This trade, as you listen to as many perspectives as you can get, and there's so much alignment that the Marlins did well with this. A lot of that because of Trevor, even though he has an extended stretch where he got good results. He had an ERA in the low 3s the last couple months. I watched every single start. I watched almost every single pitch that he threw. And he's just not somebody that was really in command of many of those games. He's still really reliant on his defense. His command, his actual literal command of his pitches is not all that special to me. Like his control is good, but he's not somebody that has yet developed pinpoint location with his stuff, which is kind of what he'll need if he's not getting as many whiffs as he used to. And if his velo very rarely goes above low 90s. So I'm just frankly not sure what the Orioles saw in him, other than the fact that the market itself didn't have a whole lot of alternatives out there. Wishing him the best. He's going to make his Orioles debut in about 26 minutes. So that will be very fascinating to watch. And happy for him overall. It's been several years since he has looked like anything more than a back-end rotation type of guy.
And also related to Norby, him playing third base potentially opens the door for a Javier Sanoja call-up. Maybe end of the season. He's kind of gone overlooked this year. He's been balling, really has not struck out whatsoever. I believe he has under 20 strikeouts the entire season. So he'd be someone. Just imagine him and Xavier Edwards at the top of the lineup. Towards the end of the season could be very interesting. So something to keep an eye on.
Definitely, at 21 years old, one of the youngest players in the system. I believe by far the youngest player in AAA. I mean, Sanoja has really stepped up, and it was very shocking promotion at the time. Didn't think it was going to be for too long. He was essentially replacing Devers, but he's looked really good. But Eli, I want to get to you really quickly on this Tanner Scott trade with Brian Hoeing. I don't think anyone saw that Hoeing part of it happening, but they get 4 prospects. We spoke to Craig about this. He said they really went for quantity over quality, but I mean, they got some pretty good quality out of this trade. They got a couple top prospects in that San Diego system. Robbie Snelling, a guy who I think a lot of us like. I know the numbers aren't great at AA. I think the ERA north of 6, but still, I mean, he's only 20 years old in AA. He reported to AA. And then you have Adam Mazur, who a lot of people are saying he was rushed up really quickly through the major leagues. And then you have Graham Pauley. And I believe it's Jay Weshers, I believe is how you say it. But he's a lower level guy, and then Paulie had some major league experience as well. But I want to dive into the two pitchers. Snelling and Mays are two guys who could help this major league team, frankly, next season if everything goes well. What do you think of them? What stands out? And why should fans maybe not overreact to their unsuccess, not much success this season, I guess, if you want to say this season?
Well, really quick with Paulie, he's gonna get a tough test today as he's batting third in Pensacola's lineup. He's gonna have to face Rhett Lauder today for Pensacola, so that should be a lot of fun to watch. And regarding the two pitchers, the consensus has been the proof is in the pudding here that the San Diego Padres have not done a tremendous job in developing their young, talented arms. You see a lot of guys really find success when they go elsewhere. And with Snelling in particular, it wasn't just so much a lack of being effective. It was, you saw a drop off in stuff, quote unquote. You saw the fastball velocity take a small dip. You saw the less break, all of his breaking balls. So, if any organization can really polish these young arms a little bit, it's the Miami Marlins. You saw what they did with Ryan Weathers. You've seen what they've done with a lot of pitchers that have had either command problems or just help them get way more oomph on their fastball. So I think I would be cautiously optimistic that the Marlins can get the most out of these two young guys. Because like you said, Kevin, he's freaking 20 years old facing competition way older than him at AA.
Yeah. Just to very briefly take a slight change of subject. This is Pensacola's lineup, as you referenced today. Marcy, Cerna, Paulie, Pintar, Martorella, Sasaki. This is the Peter Bendick special. 6 of the top 7 hitters in this lineup have been acquired in trades over the last 4 months for this team. Marcy and Martorella from the Arise trade, Cerna from the Jazz trade, Paulie from this Tanner trade, Sasaki from the Birdie trade, Pintar from the Puck trade. 5 different trades all in the last few months of guys that are at this AA level. It just, referring back to what we talked about just a few minutes ago about how many of these assets they've acquired are guys that are already in the upper minors. So even though they're all new faces, they're all ones that have shown enough to at least play at the AA level, if not actually have some success at this level right now. It's fun. It's a lot, frankly, selfishly, it's a lot easier to cover these guys from our perspective when they're playing in the upper minors. You just get more insight on them and better visuals, better understanding of who they are and how that could potentially translate to the big leagues. With Snelling, I think he has to be the most polarizing prospect of this entire haul because of the massive change in performance from one year to the next. Just to give some numbers, last year it was a 1.82 ERA in 22 starts, over 100 innings, a 1.82 ERA, facing much older competition. He finished last year at the AA level as a 19-year-old. Insane. And then this year, he's still only 20. The average age of the competition that he's facing is like 4 years older than him. So I guess that is one reason why you should take it a little bit with a grain of salt, is because he's younger than everybody that he's playing up against. At the same time, the differences from last year to this year are kind of concerning. I think his velo is down, where it's a lot more lower 90s than mid 90s that it was last year. The strikeout rate is down pretty considerably, 67 Ks and 73 innings. It's a strikeout rate right around 20%, which is below average. So the performance has just not been good this year. He was, I guess, even if you look at his very recent performances as well, it was up and down. It wasn't that long ago that he had to start where he couldn't make it out of the second inning. He had one before that where he allowed 9 earned runs, 5 home runs. When I see somebody that gets squared up that much in the minors, allowing 14 homers this season alone in 16 starts, that kind of, that makes you notice that there's something really off that needs to be changed. So because he's so young and because he still has a while before he has to go on the 40-man roster, it's still 2 more years before he's even Rule 5 eligible. They have a lot of time to figure this out with Snelling. But he could end up being the best player in this deal if he gets back to what he was last year. The Marlins buying low, the Padres really desperate. Some would say a little recklessly desperate for this year, trying to get in with a team that they're mortgaging so much of their farm. There were those 2 guys, just to close this out on the Padres. The reason why they had to go with quantity over quality is because there's really only 2 guys in this Padres system that they couldn't get to. It was Ethan Salas and DeVry, the international signing, those two teenagers that are exceptionally talented. But then there was a pretty big drop off to the rest of the farm system. The Marlins kind of got the best of the rest, especially if you include the Arise trade. So they got what they could get. And I applaud them for packaging Scott with Hoeing. I was kind of pounding the table saying, Scott is not going to get as much as you think. He's not going to get as much as you think. But when you include Hoeing, I think Hoeing had real value. Hoeing's been good this year when he's been healthy.
Made his Padres debut already.
Yeah, there are things that Hoeing has value. He's inexpensive and controllable, and he can throw strikes, and he can throw multiple innings. So he was a real piece of that. And so I applaud the creativity here. But it's a deal that could get them a lot. It could get them like 3 solid contributing players for many years to come, or it could get them very little. So I think it was a really creative deal. I like this one from the Marlins perspective.
And then a quick update from Jacksonville. Augustine Ramirez is catching, actually already has a hit and an RBI. De Los Santos is 0 for 4. So we'll just pass by that one. But the last trade I think we should really get into is this the Brian De La Cruz trade. Definitely an interesting one to say the least, but it's a guy who they've been targeting for a very, very long time. The pitcher Shim, Shim. And then I guess not necessarily a throw-in, but it kind of feels like that after you kind of hear what Craig had to say on it. We won't get into that aspect too much, but Garrett Forrester, the other player in this trade. Definitely health concerns with Shim. He's been pitching, though, some live BPs. Isaac, what stands out to you about this guy? It's a guy who feels like the Marlins have really been trying to target for a very, very long time. We heard it with the Jazz possibility of the trade, and even in the offseason leading up to the year during spring training, Edward Cabrera's name was going out there, and this is one of the pieces that was thrown as a possible return.
Yeah, we don't want to spoil too much of our unfiltered episode with Craig, but he did mention to us that the Marlins have been targeting this young man for a very long time. It is an enormous concern in the industry is his health. They do not know what he can give you long term. They could end up with nothing from this Brian De La Cruz trade. This was the one trade that they were, I guess, prepared to receive nothing if push came to shove here. But I think they're very hopeful that this guy gets healthy. He's got some of the best stuff immediately in the system. He can throw it as well as anyone. And so he's the exciting piece there. Like you mentioned, Kevin, he wouldn't have been the centerpiece of a deal for Jazz. We know the Pirates were very, very much in on Jazz, but he would have been probably the second piece in that deal. But in this deal for Brian De La Cruz, they get him for a few years of club control. And the Marlins are taking a complete flyer on Shim. Shit. It's going to take some time to get used to pronouncing that name. But I personally, I'm a big believer that the Marlins got so much value for 2 months of Yimi Garcia. They got 3 years of Brian De La Cruz, slightly below league average production offensively. I think he was way more than what I think Kim expected when she acquired this player. And he really provided his purpose. And now after that, we'll see what he turns into in this trade. But at the end of the day, he's a sub 300 on base guy, Brian De La Cruz. And I personally didn't see him having so much value. And I think that Miami did pretty well. I don't agree with some of the stuff that was written in the Herald. I think that this is easily a risk you take for Shim.
There we go. So as much as we want to talk about the process, we have to talk about the major league team and what's to come in the second half of the season, potential call-ups, who we're most excited to see, maybe prove themselves that they have an opportunity to be out here. Nate, talk to us, man. I mean, this is a major league team that's pretty depleted right now. You have a couple young guys in Stowers. You have Xavier Edwards, Jake Berger out there. I mean, who are you most excited to kind of watch in the second half and see if they have what it takes to really stick on this major league roster?
Mostly the younger guys, of course, Xavier Edwards. I mean, knew that was going to come from me. But Jesus Sanchez continuing to get extended looks against not just righties, but also lefties as well. Skip is, once the Marlins have done more and more losing, he's kind of left to man against lefties. So hopefully that happens. I mean, you 30 games under 500 at this point. There's nothing to lose. Let the guy get his reps. He was on the list. Him and Xavier Edwards, per Isaac, were the guys that were unlikely to be dealt. So it states the Marlins have a lot of faith in those guys. They have faith that they could be a part of this team in the long term. So I'd love to see Jesus Sanchez continue to get chances. Kyle Stowers, of course, you want to see that guy get at bats every single day. He hasn't really got the full shot in the major leagues, but he's going to have the next month or month and a half or so to just get his reps and see what the Marlins have in him. Also in the bullpen, just see if guys can emerge as like sturdy back end guys such as Fauché, such as Nardi, maybe working the 8th, and then of course maybe potentially closing if they want to flip flop between him and Fauché. Same with Cronin; he could also get some of those 8th and 9th innings. And then on the pitching side, Edward Cabrera, I did want to point this out. His stuff has looked a little better. He did well against the Orioles, and he did well, of course, in his last start before coming out with the knee injury. But obviously, it's the watch that continue to play him. But I said he did a big step forward against Baltimore, maybe just a little step forward, a tiny step. But his stuff against a Baltimore-like lineup, a lineup like Baltimore's, it did play. So hopefully he can continue to figure out. If not, it might be time for the pen. So those guys, specifically, and of course Max Meyer, just getting the extended look against big league guys, just mostly the young guys coming up.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought up Edward Cabrera because I was meaning to touch on him when we were discussing the Tampa Bay Rays series. That was easily the best that we've seen him, that I've seen him, honestly, this year. And it's not saying much. He's been hurt and he's been shitty, no other way to say it, all year long. And I was like, okay, that was 2 good starts in a row. I brought in his last 3 starts, including the one against the Mets, Baltimore, and Tampa. The FIP is in the mid-5s. He's 14-11 strikeout to walk ratio. I was the biggest believer in this young man. I think you can say that he has the best stuff in the entire organization, and I will continue to say that. He was throwing 94-mile-an-hour changeups to Anthony Santander. But I am prepared to take the L on this one. I think you just can't continue to throw him out there. There's no reason not to for the rest of this year anyway. But I think in Major League Spring Training next year, you have to really be prepared to try him out in the bullpen. And maybe that changes everything. Maybe he can give you 2 to 3 innings every single time, be that Andrew Miller type reliever for you where he'll be untouchable. But I think this starting pitching experiment has really sort of blown up in their face a little bit. Last year, he had a couple of good starts, but they were against the Oakland Athletics and the Kansas City Royals. He doesn't really have great examples of being dominant against decent major league teams as a starter. At least 6 or 7 innings, it just hasn't happened for him. Unfortunately, too many 3-ball counts, too many times just not throwing strikes early in the count. He's just scared to throw first pitch fastballs. He's scared to put people away with his fastball. So it's a shame. Like I said, best stuff in the organization by far. I don't think there's any debating that, but it might be time to try something new.
To answer a couple quick questions before the break, why is Anthony Maldonado still down? He hasn't been pitching great in Jacksonville. It's been inconsistent. It was just the other night where I put out the highlight of Kyle Stowers hitting a home run off of Maldonado, and Isaac asked me, is that a fastball or a changeup? And I think it's a fastball.
Was it a fastball?
Aside from his slider, there's just the rest. He's a 1-pitch guy right now, and the slider is awesome. But even at the AAA level at this moment, there are times where if he's in an obvious fastball count, then the velo is not there. The whole, there's just none of the characteristics of those pitches are really all that good right now. I think he will be up at some point just because they rotate through a lot of arms. He's not being blocked by Austin Kitchen or Jesus Tinoco, any of these guys. So we will see him at some point, but not imminent. The other one was a very simple one right here. No, we're not going to see Thomas White or Noble Meyer this September in the majors. They are well. So Noble, unfortunately, last night was a really yikes performance from him. He only went 2 innings. He allowed like 6 runs on a bunch of walks. With Noble, it's been kind of rocky with his control. So Thomas is definitely ahead, but not this far ahead. Not like not as a 19-year-old. So he's the guy that most bold thing we might see with those guys is maybe one of them sneaks to spring training as like a non-roster invitee. But even that I find to be really unlikely there. So
no way.
We have a whole lot to get to on the other side of the break, but I want to quickly go to our flipped fish in here. You know how we do it. Picking somebody that played for both of these teams during their careers, both the Marlins and the Braves right here. We could do Jorge Soler, but that'd be too easy. It's not a Jorge Soler one. This one is a retired player. I think I actually made this one somewhere. Did I actually? I wonder if I even have this one ready or not. Do I have the graphic somewhere? Give me just a moment. See if I can pull it up. This one, maybe I screwed up and I didn't actually publish the link of it right here. I don't know. I can't actually find this one. It would have been Mike Redmond. Mark Redmond. Mark Redmond.
I was gonna say, what the fuck?
Yeah, from the 2003 to 2003 Marlins, and then he pitched very briefly with the Braves later in his career. I didn't have my graphic handy. I thought I did, but That would have been a hard one. I had that as an 8.5 out of 10. I don't think anybody would have got Mark Redmond as a flip fish guy between Marlins and the Braves.
Should we just go around and toss out the most obscure Marlins Braves that we've done in the past? We just
Absolutely. Go
Yeah.
ahead. Nate, start.
Someone else start. It was my idea. Someone else go for it.
I'm going to go with Marlin Killer. Absolute. You think Ryan Zimmerman, you think Ryan Howard. Matt Diaz, not Diaz, Matt Diaz as my flip fish. That guy made Marlins fans' lives miserable. Matt Diaz, I'll never forget. And then they signed, obviously they signed him, and he stunk as a Marlin, but he would destroy the Marlins as a Brave.
I'll go off of that. I'll go with Matt Adams. He also killed the Marlins in his time as a Brave, and of course as a Cardinal as well. So Matt Adams, first baseman.
Is he Marlin?
I remember Matt Adams.
Why am I thinking Marlin? All right, come back to me. I don't know what I'm thinking. Obviously not a Marlin. I don't know.
He bounced around a little bit. Big city.
Not a Marlin though. Jeez, oh man.
Not a Marlin.
Not even close to being a Marlin, I don't think. He played for the Nationals at one point after the Cardinals days. He bounced around a little bit towards the end.
Did he go to big league spring training with the Marlins? No,
I don't think so.
No,
I'm just completely wrong. No, he was not a Marlin at all. I heard the name Matt. I was like, oh, but no, just completely wrong.
I was like, wait a second.
Yeah,
Kevin.
Give me Billy Hamilton. He was a legend in 1 year with the Marlins.
Yeah,
And he did spend some very, very limited time with the Braves. So
did he?
Yes, he did.
I think he did.
did.
Did he? Yeah.
Let me make sure I'm right. But
Yeah. He actually spent more time with the Braves than the Marlins. 26 games with the Braves and only 20 with the Marlins. It's a
really,
good
it felt
poll.
like a lot more for Billy that year.
That's a good poll right there.
All right, Eli, you're up.
Oh, I mean, Nick Anderson, who spent half a season with the Marlins and 1 year with the Braves at some point. Yeah. I don't remember him being particularly good for the Braves.
No, he was
No,
not.
it wasn't.
What a trade that is to have Jesus Sanchez for him, huh?
It's looking
He
real good
was
right
a
now.
flip fish earlier this season, but Omar Infante was definitely a Brave. He was a Marlins. He was on second baseman on the 2012 Marlins team. Almost hit for the first cycle in team history. That was like one of my first memories as a Marlins fan. But in all those Xavier Edwards hitting the first cycle, we might as well go back to Omar Infante, Royals legend, Marlins legend.
Did Jared Schultz, he played in the minors with the Braves?
No,
he came up with the Braves. I don't know if he was.
Yeah, he was definitely one. When I was picking it out for Twitter today, I go to the link, and he was definitely one of them. If you guys are in the comments, comment a whole bunch of obscure flipped fish between the Marlins and the Braves. There's a lot of good ones. There's some famous ones like Dan Ugla, Martin Prado, guys like that. And then there's some pretty obscure ones, like the ones that Kevin mentioned, Billy Hamilton, Matt Diaz. I'm trying to think of another one. Sean, what? No, so we'll think of one.
Echeverria is a good one.
Echeverria was,
but he was more.
Mike Dunn is a good one. Nick Whitgren was a Brave. Yeah. Anyways,
all right. So we're gonna go to the break. We'll talk a little bit Marlins and Braves, a little bit Max Meyer, previewing that, and what's to come for the second half of the season for the Fish. So we'll see you on the other side.
We have been representing people injured as a result of other people's negligence for over 50 years here in South Florida. If you get injured as a result of somebody else's negligence, it can be a car accident, it can be a slip and fall, medical malpractice, negligent security. If somebody else's negligence caused an injury to either you or one of your loved ones, give us a call. Our phone number is on our page, our website is on our page, and our email addresses are on our page. Please, give us a call for a free consultation. We'd love to help you. Let Zach and I protect your rights.
Alrighty, we are back. Marlins and Braves series preview. Let's talk a little bit about Max Meyer. Struggled a little bit in his first start back. Didn't go too long against, I believe it was the Brewers who he faced. Eli, what you like about Max? What did you not like about his start against Milwaukee?
Yeah, it was weird because how deep counts were being worked against him throughout the entire outing too. Like he was averaging 5.5 pitches per plate appearance. That is unheard of. The league average is a little bit below 4, and especially if you're a starter, you want to be significantly below that if you want to go deep. But I don't think he even made it 2 full times through the order, and he threw 86 pitches on his way to doing that. So it was a little rocky with Max right there, but that's we want a bigger sample to like figure out exactly what he's going to bring right here, and this is the time to do it. it's a pretty crucial stretch for him, because even though we valued him pretty highly as a prospect coming up, there's still a question about whether he can actually stick as a starter. The pitch usage looks a little different, where it was more fastballs than we saw early in the year, and he was working on that in the minors. But it's not that the fastball is all that improved from what it used to be. There's still the question about how many bats he can miss with it, how well he can control it as well. So this will be an interesting test, because the Braves aren't all that much of a superior offensive team than even the Brewers are right now. They're in a bit of a desperation mode coming into the series offensively. So I would actually have pretty high expectations for what Max is going to do this time around in order to finish guys off and not work as deep counts right now, especially given the state of the bullpen at this point. You do not want those guys really pitching in games. It's not really a high priority to get some of these guys into games. The best thing that Max can do is show that he can be efficient and work deeper into games than he has been. And that's what I'm going to be looking for tonight.
All right, let's take a look at these lineups. Marlins and Braves. A little bit different look for Atlanta. No Acuna, no Ozzy Albies still, I think. But at the leadoff spot, a former Marlin who was recently traded, Jorge Soler, going back to Atlanta. I believe, and this is a report that came out, that they actually treated their veterans pretty nicely, allowed them to kind of choose more or less where they wanted to go. It's a full salary dump for the Giants. But Soler goes back to a team where he really found a lot of success. He went to the World Series with them. He was really, really good. So, Isaac, talk to us about Jorge Soler, man. What, that 2021 year with the Braves with an 882 OPS, 14 homers. Obviously his biggest moment was that World Series homer, which was a no-doubter. Obviously your thoughts on the trade too, because I don't think anyone saw this coming from where the Giants were kind of in it, kind of not in it. They had a pretty solid team, but just kind of lived up to expectations. And same goes to Soler. He really hadn't lived up to expectations either with the Giants.
Yeah, I love how they insert him right back in the leadoff spot where he did all his magic for them in that magical 2021 season. Soler, yeah, like you said, Kevin, not exactly having the year that he had last year with Miami. The clutch genius sort of disappeared. And regarding the trade, complete salary dump from in the Giants' perspective. They really didn't get much for him, but they did pay him a lot of money that the Marlins were not willing to serve up. And good thing they didn't. We're all worried that he would have taken the qualifying offer, blah, blah, blah. Well, I digress. But yeah, I think this is exactly the type of change of scenery that Soler needed. He's just not getting on base as often as he was or as he usually does. The slugging is a little bit lower than usual, only got 12 home runs. But like I said, I think this will help. The Braves need all the outfield help they can get. They're running out Jared Kelenic every single day, even though he's been okay. It's not really what you want. And with Acuna gone, it was Albies hurt. I'm surprised they didn't add more pieces, to be honest. But I always have faith in Anthopoulos. He's the best executive in Major League Baseball, in my humble opinion. And it's going to be really exciting to see him back. I wouldn't be surprised if Soler goes deep off Max Meyer to lead off the game today.
That'd be something. But all right, let's take a full look at these lineups because although Atlanta still doesn't have the monsters that they do in Acuna and Ozzy Albies, it's still a pretty good lineup for the most part. They have Austin Riley and Marcell Ozuna, who was an All-Star this year, and then you have Matt Olson there, still an amazing top four. Nate, take us through this Braves lineup, a little bit different than what the Marlins saw not too long. Well, yeah, kind of long ago. Honestly, it's been a minute. I think the last time it was when Ozuna took Tanner Scott deep in that final game, I want to say. But yeah, man, talk to us about this Braves team.
Still pretty deep. It's going to be hard for them or anyone else to recreate the season they had last year, especially offensively. The Marlins, remember when they went back to Atlanta late June, early July, the Braves absolutely teed off on the Marlins. It was kind of like their bid test. They threw up Brian Hoeing. It was not pretty. But the Braves have kind of taken a step back a little bit this year. The Phillies have really taken the East by control. And the Braves are kind of being challenged by the Mets a little bit if the Mets stay hot. But of course, you have familiar faces: Austin Riley, Flip Fish, Marcell Ozuna, Matt Olson, Arcia. They bring some of the old band, the 2021 band, back together with Soler back at the top, and of course Eddie Rosario. It's just same old Braves. They're going to hit for power. Not going to see as much success, of course, without Mr. Acuna missing the entire season with another injury. But same power, most of the same guys. Jared Kelenic, who has been a little bit better than expected. Braves kind of took a flyer on him, and of course, I guess whoever goes the truest just hits for the Braves. So he's him and Sean Murphy running at the bottom of the order isn't something really to complain about. So and Whit Merrifield, who I believe took questionable with an injury, but he's been back for a little bit now. So yeah, same old Braves. Jorge Soler. I'm kind of with Isaac. I would not be surprised if Jorge Soler gets his former team back with a little bomb. So we'll see.
You brought up Sean Murphy. He's one of the more fascinating players because he came over from the A's last year. He hit better than anybody could have dreamed during the first half of last year. He was like in the MVP periphery early on. He was amazing. And then ever since the second half of last year, he's been a below average hitter. He slumped so badly after the All-Star break last year. This year, he's been improving, but still it's an 89 WRC plus from this guy who's never been under 100, who was at 129 for last season overall. And like, so he's missed a lot of time due to injury. And then even when he's been healthy, hasn't been the same guy. People early on, it looked like that was such yet another team-friendly extension. They gave him like 6 years, 90 million. And now all of a sudden, from what I sense from Braves community, like all of a sudden that's looking like a bad deal, pretty deep into his 30s for a guy that I think is still good defensively, but no longer as somebody that was knocking on the door for somebody that could have been the top catcher in baseball. He's now somebody that is deep in this lineup where it really does drop off. To me, I see it drop off pretty clearly from 4 to on down. After you get to Olsen, there are guys that can be pitched to, that they do have those track records. That's fair. Like, you're never going to be super comfortable against them just because of what they've accomplished in the past. At the same time, they're just not producing a whole lot this year. Otherwise, this team would be in a stronger position. It is surprising that they are, even without Acuna, the fact that they are making the playoffs is even a question, is quite a twist for a team that has won the NL East 6 years in a row. At this point, that looks like a pipe dream, and it's more so which wild card can they get at the end of the day.
Yeah, and you kind of look at this team. It's Ozuna leading the team in OPS plus, Darnode, Riley, Ronald, who's out. And then you have a huge drop-off with Matt Olson at a 98. And then you have a lot of guys who just really stepped up for them last season and just have kind of struggled. But let's look at this team's pitching. I mean, they're going with Charlie Morton today. Feels like the Marlins have been able to get to Morton the last couple of years, I would say, Isaac. Just what do you think they've been able to get to with Morton that's made them kind of almost, very successful against someone like a Charlie Morton?
Yeah, it's just that old Uncle Charlie curveball that he's had his entire life. I feel like Jazz Chisholm Jr. was the guy that really had strong numbers against Charlie. So I can't say that Marlins gonna have too much success. Our boy X is gonna get at least a hit or two. He's a new arise. I can see him not striking out, but what Charlie Morton's been able to do in particular has really been something special to watch. I didn't think he'd be able to do this yet again for the Atlanta Braves, but like I said, this isn't his best year as an Atlanta Brave, but just the fact that he's out there throwing 100-something innings, doing what he does, being above average pitcher for this team that desperately needs it, it's been really special to see. And I unfortunately expect him to have a pretty nice start today.
Yeah. So you guys brought up Xavier Edwards really quickly. I think we want to reward the people for tuning in right now with just a little tease of the upcoming Fish Unfiltered episode with Mish on X. He has had just an amazing month. His stock is way up. In my opinion, he has proved me wrong and really shown himself to be somebody that could be a building block of this organization. And almost at this time a year ago, he was part of another organization. This is a bit of reporting that Craig has not shared before, but he did about Xavier Edwards going back to last year's deadline. Take a look. Has he really changed any opinions of him in the org just by how really amazing he's been?
He's been great. Yeah, no, he's been great. And to think that the Marlins almost traded him last year to the Well, no, I don't want to say that. That's not fair. That's going too far. The Marlins could have traded him last year to the Nationals. That's who the Nationals wanted for Candelario. So Marlins would have gotten Candelario. The Nationals would have gotten Edwards. But the Marlins didn't do that deal. So that's something I don't think that I've reported before. There you go. I gave you guys something good.
Nate's face, man.
Thank God for Kim Ng on that one. Because I was one of the guys that was really preaching for Candelario, especially the way that he killed the Marlins last year.
Yeah.
Wow. Dodged a bullet. That's all I'm
Yeah,
going to say.
if you put them back, just put your mind back where it was a year ago. Candelario was by far the best third base option out there. I think a lot of us were of the opinion that the Gene Segura experiment had gone on long enough. Bring him in. I don't think I was against making that trade, even if it cost some prospects. It would have been a steep price to pay to send Edwards in that example. But if that had happened, I don't think it would have been earth shattering in the moment, to be honest with you. It would have seemed like an overpay. But again, in hindsight, I'm glad that they didn't do it, especially that's one of those cases where inside your division, it still is really scary to make those deals if you're sending somebody that's young and controllable the other way, somebody that could haunt you for another half decade over there. Imagine Edwards at second base right now and Abrams at shortstop, and that being the long-term middle infield for the Nats. You would worry about how long it's going to take the Marlins to catch up to the Nats at this point. So yeah, so a bullet dodge. Sometimes the best trade is the trade that you do not make.
Yeah, and if they make that trade, maybe the Nationals don't take Nasim Nunez in the Rule 5 draft, and you still have Nasim. Who knows?
Oh,
We would have thought much of it then as well, because he's like, oh, he's just a rise light. We would have thought probably that Arise would have been in Miami for a long time, but you know, a lot can happen in a year. So Kim Ng, huge bullet dodge. So thank goodness.
Let's talk a little bit about Spencer Schwellenbach, the Braves starter, the only other listed starter at the moment from those game notes. He's got off to a little slow start, but in his rookie year, he's been really good for them lately. I believe he had a great start, going 7 innings, about, I want to say 11 strikeouts not too long ago. Eli, I don't know how much Spencer Schwellenbach you've been able to watch, but what have you liked about him so far, and what's made him so good lately, and what challenges does he present to the Marlins?
I have watched quite a bit of Spencer Schwellenbach, believe it or not. And
Wow.
I've been kind of impressed. I remember him as a draft prospect just a few years ago, thinking that I remember Hector Rodriguez on our staff when we were with Fish Stripes. He wrote up a draft profile on him because he had two-way potential. He was a two-way player in college. I think he may have been a two-way guy at the very start of his pro career with the Braves too, and now just pitching only. He has a super deep pitch mix, and especially his off-speed pitch. I forget whether it's a changeup or a splitter. It has split action to it, and it gets a lot of swings and misses. Really deep pitch mix. The velo itself is really ordinary. It's like 93 to 95 or 96 occasionally, but he has a few different things that he can use to get swings and misses right there. This continues to be just another example. The Braves, they've had one of the lowest ranked farm systems in baseball for several years now, and yet even guys that are not extremely highly heralded by those ranking systems, they turn out to be better big leaguers than you might have imagined. So he has been a really big piece for them to stabilize that rotation, because Max Fried has missed some time this year. They've overall just had not a ton of rotation depth. The guys that have been available have been really good, but back into that rotation has needed guys to step up, and Schwellenbach has been huge for them right now. I don't know if he has enough innings in him to last the entire season right now. He does have enough though to make this start right here. He's just pretty consistently, he's around that quality start territory. It's usually just 1 or 2 runs allowed, 5-ish innings that he goes. And so I think they're feeling all right about that. I want to just make an educated guess who we might see the next 2 games. It looks like Max Fried is an option for Sunday. And then Grant Holmes. I do not know anything about Grant Holmes, but he pitched a couple days ago, and he is seemingly on track to start the Saturday game. I don't know anything about him at all. He's a 28-year-old who has been with like 3 different organizations in his career, mainly a reliever. Yeah, he's only made 1 start this entire season, being his previous appearance. He's had success, but only in like a sample of 28 innings so far. Yeah, the rotation is this whole Braves team, to be honest with you. Like I'm saying that this is not as strong a team as we're used to, accustomed to seeing from the Braves. This might be the weakest roster due to some injuries, due to just some regression right now. It's one of the weaker rosters they've had in like the Acuna era, I like to call it, since 2018. This team, that's why they're scrapping for a playoff spot, because they've things are not quite going their way, even though they're still comfortably above 500.
And going back to Schwellenbach, he had a pretty good month of July against teams like the Phillies, Padres, Cardinals, and Mets. 4 starts, they only gave up more than 1 run once, and that was against the Cardinals. So last start against the Mets through 7 scoreless innings, only allowed 2 hits. So Marlins probably want to get to him early, especially against playing the Braves in Truist. So he's definitely not what you want to see, especially with the line that the Marlins are trotting out.
Yeah, and Grant Holmes is going to go on, I believe, Saturdays. It was a Braves reporter that said this. And then Max Fried is actually eligible to come off the IL tomorrow, so he may be that guy for Sunday. He's been certainly a guy who the Marlins have not liked to see. But let's talk a little bit about, finally, before we go into prediction time, kind of the Marlins starting pitching situation here. So tomorrow it's a TBD or TBA. Isaac noted that Valente Belloso is going to join the team. They do have Sean Anderson as well on the active roster at the moment, so we'll see what happens there. But we could expect Belloso to go tomorrow. Isaac, I know you've been a pretty big fan of Belloso. What have you liked about him so far? He's found a lot of success, but at the same time, he has struggled a little bit with the long ball. You're muted, Isaac.
Sorry. It's literally like a niche pit, like a one-trick pony. It reminds you of Trevor Rogers. That changeup for Trevor Rogers, Belloso's cutter, is just really something that's nice. It gets out at the highest level against decent competition. I forgot which team he started against in the game that I covered at home.
I think it was the Red Sox. I was with you. It was Boston.
I think it was Boston. And it was Boston. He was getting Rafaela. He was getting O'Neill. He was getting these guys out without throwing hard. It's a really nice, humble kid. Not very big, but he's a really nice kid that I thought that, hey, I think if they're going to have one of these quote-unquote capitals stick in this rotation the rest of the way, he's the one. Not Sean Anderson, not any of these other ones. Him. I want to see what he can do in 10 starts.
And I guess if anyone cares, I believe this is the first time Forrest Wall gets a start for the Marlins, former Braves. So maybe I guess it'll help in some way. He was a former top guy too. He was a pretty solid player. But anyways, I think we're good for prediction time, Eli. We could go a little bit earlier than the usual, but I think we've covered everything. So yeah, let's do it.
This is prediction time.
I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I'm really good at this.
Yeah, prediction time. Let me see. I don't know why my files are all scrambled today, but there's the leaderboard right here. We do have one of our co-leaders joining us, even without Daniel. Nate Karsmer has tied him for first place with about 2 months to go in this regular season. I guess I could briefly show up the predictions from last time. The reason why I pulled even. I think LMF is watching with us. He had a perfect series with a split and Jake Berger. Well, yeah, it's kind of down the middle between series split and the Rays winning. Not many people picking the Marlins to win series these days, but this is how it works. Of course, how many games the Marlins are going to win, who's the MVP as determined by win probability added, mixes of our staff and our super subs competing all season long for their insight in predicting what's going to happen during these upcoming games right here. So this is a 4-game series. Another reminder, both this one and the next one, 4-game series. Not the typical 3-1 right here. Yeah, but without further ado, let's just get the background up and I'll get the music turned on. Why don't we start with ice?
Alrighty, guys. Like you mentioned, this Braves team isn't too dangerous right now. I think the Marlins will be able to salvage a split. And it's nice to say El Cubano Gigante will be the series MVP.
Nate, trying to build upon your lead.
Dating back to last year, the Marlins only won 1 game in Truist Park. Like Isaac touched on, the Braves aren't, the Braves like they've been in the past. I think they'll take one this weekend. And I'll go with Marcell Ozuna, another flip fish, series MVP.
I have the Braves winning 3 out of 4 in the set. Couple teams. I don't think it's going to be a pretty series on either side. Austin Riley as my series MVP. The overall numbers don't really show it because he had a rough first half of the season, but he's been amazing offensively. Probably their best hitter over an extended stretch of time. And I think he's going to continue to rake against what's left of this Marlins pitching staff. Maybe against Valente Belloso as well. I think he's going to hit a home run against Belloso in that Friday game coming up. So finally, Kevin Barral.
I think that the Marlins will split against the Braves, and I'm going to go with Spencer Schwellenbach as my MVP. Nate noted he's been really good as of late. I think he keeps it going against the Marlins.
Very good.
Just I think you guys deserve to know. Stephen Kwan led off with a single against Trevor Rogers, and then he gave up a double right afterwards, and Trevor Rogers immediately is in trouble with second and third, nobody out in his Oriole debut.
Yeah, we'll be keeping tabs on that, wishing him the best. But as I mentioned, just to be frank, like really surprised. I don't know what the Orioles saw in him that I didn't from watching him regularly. But yeah, tough opposition that he's going against. We'll keep track of him. Yeah, I didn't actually get a chance to show all these old faces and new places that I chopped up from earlier. A lot of these guys making debuts moved at the deadline on Tuesday. Many of them made their debuts the very next day, including DLC in Pittsburgh. Hoeing finishing the game for the Padres already. Oscar Brazovan throwing, as Kevin noted, the hardest pitch of his season. He hit 99 in the strikeout for the Mets, and he pitched a scoreless inning. Tanner did not pitch last night because it was a blowout win, but in a more high leverage situation tonight, we imagine that we'll see him. Who else are we waiting on to debut? I'm not necessarily going to be glued to see what JT Chagua is doing, respectfully. Good luck.
Waiting on Josh Bell
in Seattle, and then Josh Bell. Yes, Josh Bell making his debut tomorrow in Pittsburgh, where he started his professional career and played a lot of his major league career, but now is a member of the Diamondbacks.
If you want to see what the Marlins got in return for these guys, Lewis put out a great piece of something to like about everyone the Marlins got, so be sure to go check that out. FishOnFirst.com did a great job.
Absolutely.
Alrighty.
Trevor, 2 earned runs in the bottom of the first. Josh Naylor with an RBI single. Oh man, and Trevor, just to say, because Trevor was one of the longer tenured guys in the 2017 draft class, one of the most upstanding, kind people on that team. Always a professional, always a class act, and he's someone that we're definitely going to root for heavy over here at Fish On First.
Yep. All right. So we'll wrap it up here. Make sure to check out the game tonight. Make sure to check out all our coverage at fishonfirst.com. You can check out the podcast tomorrow, Fish on First. You can listen to that wherever you want, as well as you could watch it on YouTube. So we'll wrap it up here with Isaac, Nate, and Eli, and myself. We'll see you guys all on Tuesday for Monday. I believe Monday for Reds Marlins 4-game set in a very, very long homestand. So we'll have you covered from all aspects of the team. Peace out and go Fish.